Okay, we're on Daf Mem Vav, Ois Gimel. So our mission is to understand the pasuk that says "וזכרתם" as called mitzvahs Hashem. וזכרתם now, of course, standard ordinarily means to remember. In this context, Alter Rebbe points out it also is similar to the word for zachar. In this context, meaning the benefactor, the mashpiya. Now it's explained in Likkutei Torah of the Arizal that the letters of mem tzadik out of the word mitzvah is through the formula called atbash. That is, you take the aleph, swap it out with the taf, first letter, last letter, beis, shin, second letter, second to last letter. If you do that, the mem and tzadik will become yud and hey. And of course, the other two letters in the word mitzvah are vav and hey. So you have the Shem Havaya, which are the 200, the idea being that the mitzvahs are the 248, the obligations, expressions of Hashem, Avar and Dmlekã. And Malka, of the king, is Zah. And sometimes the mitzvahs are called the mitzvahs HaMelech, this idea of Malchus, because mitzvahs are in Malchus and Torah is in Zah. Meaning to say that if so, the Malchus are not included in Zah, and the Ramach Evarim, the 248 limbs, is the atzmis of Zah mamish. And again, Zah is Zeir Anpin, the first 6 of the midos, not including Malchus. They're not expressive, they're internal, which is not the case with the ציווי המלך, which are only the instructions and not the atzmis and the Evarim themselves. So this is a disparity in the character of mitzvahs. Are the mitzvahs the Eibishter himself, or are they only the instructions of the Eibishter? The point being that down here we see that they are the instructions of Hashem, the mitzvahs hamelech. However, their origin is that they are the Evarim Dmlekã. They're the actual limbs of Hashem. Like the pasuk that describes why Chava is called Isha, because she is taken from the man. That is, through this erusa de lasata of a person, they draw out that the mitzvahs should not only be the instructions of Hashem, they should be, quote, Hashem mamish, the Evar and the Dmlekã. Here's an example. If a person injures their toenail, they sense it even all the way to their brain that registers that their toenail has been injured. Similarly, through the mitzvahs, even though they are, quote, only gashmis, and they are done down here, because that is the instruction of the king, it touches the Or Ein Sof that rests within it, and it draws down this level of the cyrus of Urich Anpin in the Ramach mitzvahs, the hairs, as we talk about, the extension of Hashem. And again, the Ramach mitzvahs in this context underscores that they are the 248 limbs of the Zah, the internal aspect of Hashem. So when we see them as mitzvahs hamelech, they are, quote, only the instructions. When we see them as Ramach Evarim, they are the expression that draws down from, ultimately from Chachmi law, that is rooted again in the cyrus of Archanpin, that is drawn down to the Bittel, and that creates the Eish Hashem, the fire of Hashem. And as the Parsha continues and it says, do not follow after your hearts. Because even though in Atzilus there is no Ra, but in Klipas Noiga, where you have Tov and Ra together, even though you also have the Esesviris, but they are a mixture of both Tov and Ra. And there can be a hijacking of that Kedusha. Like it says in Likkutei Torah of the Arizal regarding the idea of the Yarden, takes from one and gives to the other. That is, in Klipas Noiga, there is Kedusha, but there's also the Klipa. And sometimes the Klipa steals away some of that Kedusha. This means that through the Noiga, it allows for the nourishing away from Kedusha even to the Ra. And this is the idea of the Saita drinking the waters, the bitter waters, to determine if she is in fact innocent, in which case she will have children. So too, every person is a combination of good and evil. And he has to uproot his passion for foreign pleasures through having an overwhelming passion for Hashem. And Eish Hashem, that is a fire for Hashem. Like we say, Eish Hashem is the hay itself becomes on fire. What is that hay that comes on fire? That is the 5 characteristics of Gvura that are ordinarily of nukva meaning they are receptive, that they are then elevated up. Instead of being only makabel, they draw out a greater fire from the ish, which is fire with the yud. So the isha emblazons the 5 gevuros, thus evoking a greater hashpah from the ish, which is eish hey. And those are those chasadim. And these are the 5 gevuros elyonim that are the chasadim that are from above to below. And then the pasuk continues, Laman tizkeru, so that you should remember, and tizkeru from the lashon of zachar, that you will become the zachar, like the parsha that continues with Bahaloischa es haneros. You will elevate the 5 gvuros of nukva, that the woman will produce the son. That is, isha mazras tchila yoled the zachar, that the isha, the fire in the 5 gvuros, produces the zachar. Like a candle down here that lights up a candle above it, and it too is in the motion of extending itself outside of itself to detach itself from the flame. And so too, from candle to reaching up to higher and higher candle. Like we explain on Shabbos, that the world is elevated, that it becomes to a higher and higher level, that as it is elevated, it lifts all worlds. And through this, we will fulfill all of the mitzvahs. These are those who do the mitzvahs, to draw down the infinite light of Hashem in the mitzvah, that the mitzvah should be a keli for the Or Ein Sof. Because mitzvah the Ein Sof, which is, as its name implies, it has no end. It is Ram Veniskav, it is uplifted, but the neshamas of the Jews are what are drawn down. And it's possible that this is the higher level, even higher than וזכרתם, that it says initially to make them zechrim, that is, that they are ma'ira through the mitzvah, a revelation, and a drawing down of the 248 limbs of the king, zod atzilus, which is called zachar chastoi. However, this level of asisma is called mitzvah, is a drawing down of Or Ein Sof mamash into the 248 limbs, like it says in the Geras HaKodesh, that every mitzvah is designed to organize the 248 limbs through drawing down the infinite light of Hashem from the moichin. And the source of the moichin is the labnunius, that is the pure desire for Hashem. And now we understand what it means. Kadosh, meaning the character, like the hair, which is the expression of the brain, that like we find by the Nazir, also in the Parsha, that the Nazir allows his hair to grow long, that is, the Nazir draws down this level called Cyrus, that is, it draws down from the Cyrus of Arichanpin, and this is how it is in the idea of Kadosh and Kedusha. And the 3 times that we say Kadosh is the 3 aspects of the hair. And then it goes on to explain a little bit of some of the Kabbalistic ideas behind the koitz and the sari of Arich Anpin that come down from the backside of Zah. And again, this is a Kabbalistic idea, that this is the 3 levels of Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya that are drawn out from Atzilus. That is the Chabad, Chagas, Nihi. And this is the idea of the 3 points that there is in the shape of the letter Yud, the higher and the lower and the center. If you imagine the shape of a Yud with the point above, the point below, and the point that attaches them. And through this, we create Havayat Tzavakas, the drawing down of the life force into the worlds. And this is what it means, that they should be sanctified to their God, Lalakechem, not to Havayat. That is only to the level of Malchus, the level of Yichuda Tata, where we exist and we become attached to Hashem. That we, bow down, a bittul hayesh. That is, we put aside our identity, not our existence. That the Yidden draw down this level called the Cyrus, the hairs, into the level of Malchus to have bittul. And this is through the bittul, also even in the Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya, to have bittul hayesh. And this is what we mean when we say, not only we bonaich, but boinaich. That is, not only we the offspring, but we are the builders of this relationship. Now there's a new mimer here, Memvav Amid Beis, based on the conclusion of the Parsha that says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem. And this is a continuation of a previous drasha. The end of the Parsha says, Ani Hashem Elokeichem asher tzesi eschem eretz Mitzrayim, I am Hashem, your God, I took you out of Mitzrayim, meaning That when it says Kedoshim Tiyu, you might think that we should be like Hashem. And yet, Hashem is way beyond anything we could approach. The point being that there is Isarusa de La'ela, that through this through this Rusa de Lasata, we evoke this Rusa de La'ela. And this is what it means that we should be Kedoshim La'lekeichem, that the Yidden through Rusa de Lasata should draw down Rusa de La'ela through the three characteristics called Kadosh. And there is an Rusa de La'ela before there is this Rusa de Lasata, to elevate from below to above. And this level of Rusa de La'ela is far greater than that which is achieved through this Rusa de Lasata. That the Rusa de Lasata cannot reach this unprompted Rusa de La'ela. Like the Baal Shem Tov said regarding the phrase, the Bas Kol announces that these are the Hiruri Tshuva that come to a person unwittingly. They come milmaila. The person has not done anything to achieve them. They simply are stimuli provided by Hashem, because it is God's desire simply to do this kindness. And regarding this, it says that my holiness is beyond your holiness, meaning not only that God is quote unquote holier than us, but the holiness which God provides is beyond anything that we can provide. And regarding this, it says, I am Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim. That I am the one who took you out is the Rusa de Lasata. And then I am Hashem Elokeichem. That's the Rusa de La'ela. That is the product of the Rusa de Lasata. That is, we cry out through Torah, we call out to Hashem through Torah. That draws down a Giliyot Ein Sof in Torah. And in general, all the mitzvahs are for the sake of Kudsha Bricho and Shchinte, to unify them. That is, Kudsha Bricho is Zeir Anpin of the Olam Ein Sof, and Shchinte is the Malchus that is nested in Bria, Yitzir, Nasiya, the source and root of Neshamas Yisrael. Now in Bria, Yitzir, Nasiya, these are the Olam HaNefradim that Yichud Elyon cannot touch, meaning they're too sporadic, too divided, that this level of total unity is not shaykh to. The Yichud is only in Malchus, that is in the level of Bittul, which is Bittul Hayesh. We're now on Mem Vav Amud Gimel and Ois Dalet. Now from here we understand what it says in the Pasuk, Vayikach Kairach, that Kairach began his rebellion. And one of his questions was that if you have a talis, the actual garment is entirely blue, does it require tzitzis or not? And this seems to be simply a mockery of Moshe Rabbeinu. But here the Alter Rebbe explains that there's actually a sort of spiritual logic to Kairach's question. What does he explain? Kairach says that the talis is the or makif. That is, as we explained earlier, that the garment, in a sense, is a superior level of kedusha. And the strings of the tzitzis draw down only this very narrow level, like the hairs that grow out of the head, which express a very shallow level of godliness that are incomparable to the very essence of the talis itself. How is it possible that if the talis is blue, that is the or makif itself, which is far greater, why does it need these chutin? Why does it need these threads? And his point was that this is how he is going to argue against the idea of there being the kahuna vada. That is, that the mitzvah is through the chut hatchelis, the blue string, because through this we draw down within the person the or pnimi that it should have aven yira. As we discussed earlier, the blue flame, which is where the flame consumes the wick. And based on what we understand and the idea of the blue thread, we understand further what he's arguing here. Like we explained, the level of blue represents the moichin da'aba, which is to draw down a total bittul in this world, a total bittul hayesh, like the fiery blue flame. And the techelis is from the gevura of Abba, through which we draw down this power to create a bittul hayesh. The reason being that in order to draw down and bring this bittul to the place where there is already this contradiction of yesh, this is through gevura. And this is what we explained earlier, that the hashpa of gevura is drawn down in the pnimi, like it is drawn down of the chayis in the limb, like we say that the blood is the soul, which is not the case with the level of the chasadim that become only a makif. Like we say, with my right hand, I only surround you. It's not b'pnimius. And therefore, in order to come to bittul in the place of yesh, which is drawing down a bittul b'pnimius, it is only if it reaches mamish within the person, it deeply within his heart. And that's through the gevura of Abba, that is rooted in the chachmas tima, in which we invest the gevura of Atik. And from there, we have the source of birudim, which is bittul hayesh. And since this is the case, the ikar kavana is to reach a level of bittul and pnimius mamish, there has to be through, or can only be achieved through the blue string, through which we have the level of the chut, the string, which draws out the or pnimi mamish, and through this we draw down the kaitzid, the sarei, the edges of the hair that are drawn down from arich pin, which is not the case in the talis. Even though it's entirely blue, nevertheless, it still remains makif. And this is essentially what Kairach was arguing, that since the talis is the loftier level, it should supersede and thus negate the purpose of the strings. Why do we need to have the strings, which are more contracted godliness, when we have the more overwhelming godliness? And the answer is because that level always is going to remain makif, like the talis that surrounds us. And it doesn't reach the pnimius unless we have the chutim. And this is what we explained earlier in the mimer that begins with the phrase v'harechem tzitzis, that this expression of ava and yira, the tchelis and the lovin of the tzitzis, is called the Torah of mankind, and the talis, which is the makif itself, is like the Torah mitzvahs maisius are called the mitzvahs of Hashem. Because if a person says, I only have Torah, he doesn't even have Torah. Therefore, there has to be the chutin. This is the expression of the ava and yira. It's not enough to have the concepts of ava and yira. You have to have the manifestation of it. And through this, we remember the value of the garment. And this is what it says in the Gemara, that a person is asked when they come on high, did they establish times for Torah? Did they study it thoroughly with brilliance and genius? And did they say that the fear of Hashem is their wealth, is their treasure? If so, good, and if not, not. What is this comparable to? A person says to his friend, bring me a measure of wheat. And the guy goes and brings the measure of wheat up into his attic. He says, did you mix into it this preservative to make sure it wouldn't be ruined? He says, no. He says, well, if that case, what was the point of bringing it? What's the mashal? The chita, this wheat, is the 22, because the chita is the gematria of 22, represents the 22 letters of Torah. And that's why Matan Torah is on Shavuos, which is when it is the time of the harvesting of the wheat. And this small amount of preservatives is what Rashi describes as the salted land. Like we know that you have to have salt on every offering. As explained in the Arizal, that salt is the 3 levels of Gevurah that become sweetened. As we see that salt, melach, is the oisius of the word lechem, bread, and it's the gematria of mazallah. That is, that it's rooted in the Gevurah, because salt is ordinarily associated with Gevurah, nothing can grow in salt. And that's why it draws out blood and all sediment from the meat, because through chachma we clarify and we remove the foolishness. And it has to be mixed together with the wheat, which is Torah, in order to create a total bittul hayesh that is drawn out from the gevuras of Abba. That through this we draw out the capacity for total bittul and bittul hayesh and the quality of yira. And this is what we mention when we say, did you mix for me, that's the quote in the Gemara, this small amount of preservative? What does it mean? Did you mix it for me? Meaning when the man said to his agent, bring me the wheat, and the man brought the wheat up to the attic, and he said, did you mix in this preservative? He could have just said, did you mix it in? He said, did you mix it in for me? What is the meaning of this word? Did you mix it in for me? But the point is that since the fear of Hashem is his treasure, and the Torah and the chitim, the wheat, are mine, they're called Torah Hashem, like it says, you will be for me, to me are the Jewish people, which is not the case if you have Torah without Yira. We're now in Daf Mem Vav Amud Daled. Like you just have the measure of wheat without the preservative, even though it's very valuable, far more valuable than this little bit of preservative. It's better to have the little bit of preservative. Without that, the wheat is worthless. Like a talis that's all blue without the chutim. It's like the conceptual idea without the practical. And you'll say that chelis comes from the gevurah of Abba, like melech, salt also comes from gevurah. But a little bit of salt will provide the ultimate kindness. It will preserve, it will exhume the blood and so forth. A similar idea, we find that the tefillin of the hand is called malchus, and the mizbeach hachitzon, and the mizbeach that we don't have now, therefore we have the tefillin of shalyad. Why? Because there's so many levels within each. So even though the tefillin shalyad and the mizbeach have a parallel, we can still fulfill at least one characteristic of the tefillin shalyad, even though we don't have the parallel of the mizbeach. Nevertheless, there is still a shaychus, and that's why it says, Bris Melech Olam, the covenant, the salt covenant is forever, that Hashem made this covenant with the kohen that is preserved like salt. That salt is the idea that via chachma we identify kedusha, but that requires, again, even that small amount of preservative. So too, kahuna of Aaron has to bring out this bittul level in the neshama of the Jewish people, and it has to be unified with the strings, which represent the manifestation of the conceptual that is embodied within the garment. And then we turn our attention to previous maimarim that discuss this idea.